Hey everyone, I'm Blake Oliver, and today we're roasting broken, outdated, or just painful accounting workflows. Earlier this week, I posted on LinkedIn and I asked my fellow accountants to share their best gripes. I asked, what's the most absurd, frustrating, or just painfully outdated process that you've dealt with in accounting? And dozens of you commented. You shared your stories about piles of paper, broken workflows, ancient technology, and unreasonable clients. And in this video, I'm going to share my favorite comments. Stay tuned because there are some wild stories here. First, thanks to Puzzle for sponsoring this video. Puzzle is all about AI-powered, human-led workflows. They're making accounting smarter, safer, and faster. Scan the QR code on the screen to learn more, or click the link in this video's description. And now on to the roast. The biggest collection of gripes by far was about paper. And that was my story too. I kicked things off with something I'll never forget. Not long after I started my own firm, I went to a client's home to onboard them, and I asked for their receipts. And they went into their home office and came back with, I kid you not, a literal giant trash bag of crumpled receipts. And I almost quit right then and there. Thankfully, I was able to set up bank feeds and pull in the transactions from the client's bank account, so I didn't have to enter all those receipts manually. But that was a lucky situation. I mean, in the past, I would have had to open every single receipt and enter them all. So like that was, but that sticks in my mind. I mean, we're talking a giant black gallons and gallons of receipts there. And many of you shared your comments on this similar situation, just so much paper. Chris Murphy said back in 2017 that his client had a QuickBooks desktop file, which they only used to print checks. And the client would print and snail mail a copy of the QuickBooks check register and bank statements to his office once a month. And his job was to rekey the checks into Accounting CS and reconcile the bank accounts in Excel. Ed Kless said that he had a customer in the construction business who insisted not only on photocopying checks that were deposited, but bills and coins for the cash portion. Each bill's serial number had to be visible. Why? We may never know. Jeremy Wells said that one day the firm that he briefly worked at in 2019, the prior firm owner dropped off the 990 for a local nonprofit client that he'd prepared on paper, in pencil, barely legible handwriting. Jeremy's boss chatted with him for a while and then handed Jeremy the return, told him to enter it in the software, no documents, no financials, nothing else. So he did it, but the math didn't math. Half the due diligence questions weren't answered. And he told that to his boss, and his boss said, just make it work. Jess Berkeley says, checks full stop. Yes, I hear you, Jess. It's kind of crazy that we're still printing checks in this day and age. And Donna Reed said, a prospect mailed me a box of receipts and a pound of coffee beans. I mailed back the box of receipts and kept the coffee beans. Never heard back from them. Donna, I think you took the right approach. You stuck to your guns, and you're probably better off for it. The next collection of stories has to do with broken workflows. And it's incredible to me that we still live with these broken workflows. Firms put up with them, clients insist on them, and we don't push back. And we may have moved on from paper. Some of those stories are old, but the workflow ones, they just keep coming. Rachel said, a client I do some work for had the following process. Credit card statements come out. Someone prints it out and gives it to the card holder. The card holder, number one, highlights their expenses and then passes to card holder two. Card holder two highlights theirs and then passes to card holder three, and so on. Everyone has visibility into each other's expenses, and nothing gets categorized till the statement comes out. I actually had this situation myself with a client. It was, they do the same thing. They would print the Amex bank statement, and then it was a single Amex card that everyone used, and they would hand that around the office, and everybody would have to identify what those expenses were for, coding it to the chart of accounts by hand, and then we'd have to go in and code those transactions in the accounting system. And so we could never close the books until like weeks after the statement arrived. Ed Kless also commented, he shared another story about a customer who made 3 photocopies of invoices on 3 different colors of paper. They were using a laser printer, but wanted the colored copies like the old 4-part form they used on a dot matrix printer. Original to customer, pink in the customer's file, yellow in a sequential binder. The gray copy was just put in a box. They had dozens of boxes. Curiosity got the best of me, and one day I dug through the boxes to find the first invoice. Turns out it was printed on a sample 4-part form that came with their software. They never needed the 4th copy in the first place. Abby June Richards said, I worked for a service construction company in a satellite office that tracked all their unbilled time in Excel like it was a notepad. You would copy the format, paste new rows, advance the work order number, type in the merged cells, the number of hours for the text and the materials. Then, when you typed up the invoice in Word, you would cut the section and paste it below to show it was billed. Yes, it was Excel, but you could never sort the sheet. There was no build status tag, etc., because it wasn't set up to be a database at all. Then we sent the invoice to both the customer and to corporate for them to manually key into the actual software. I almost died the day I learned this. I realized in that moment that my business degree did not do what I thought it was going to do for my career, and immediately went back to school for my CPA. That reminds me of one of my own clients very early on when I was a bookkeeper, and they did the same thing. It was like all the timesheets were done on paper, and then we would manually enter it all into QuickBooks. And there was no connection between any of this stuff. Kathy said, I was working on a training project for a local nonprofit in the Daytona area whose accounting firm was not wanting to let the nonprofit utilize the bank feeds to pull in the individual transactions into the banking center. Rather, they were wanting them to enter the transactions manually through using accounts payable accounts. This means tedious hours of entering hundreds of transactions per month for 3 separate credit cards under a Bank of America main card. The nonprofit knew that this was crazy, but their current accounting firm did not want them to change their process. Next section of comments, ancient technology. We're talking faxes. We're talking typewriters, believe it or not. Aaron Pohan said, the fact that tax preparers / individuals still have to fax the IRS. Yes, it's amazing in this day and age, we're still using the analog technology of sending documents over analog phone lines. And I think this might be the number one gripe. Like, how can this be that this is how we submit information? And how can that be that this is how we receive information? Antonio Urbina Jr. said, still getting client documents via fax in 2025. Not a joke. The machine is in the copy room next to a motivational poster about innovation. Felicia said, as recently as a few years ago, I was working with a client that still used a typewriter to do all of their customer invoicing. Construction industry too, so there were a lot. Typewriters in the era of AI. Nicole said, financial institutions starting and ending statements mid-month. Yeah, I put this in the ancient technology section because I guess this made sense when banks had to do a lot of work to create your bank statement. And so they wanted to stagger the statements going out. But like these days, why is this necessary? Why not just have all the statements start and end at the beginning and the end of the month? It just aggravated me to no end when I could not request this. Sandro said, the distributed teams we work with constantly battle version control chaos. Proposal V12 final is practically a rite of passage. Yeah, this was my pet peeve when it came to writing proposals at the big firm that I worked at as a manager. We had a Word template, and we made copies of that template to then create client proposals. But inevitably, somebody would accidentally write over the template with details for a particular client. And so we had multiple versions of the same template, and you could never really know which one was the correct one. So all of our proposals had tiny little variations that just mutated over time. The final collection of gripes in our roast today is unreasonable clients. And there's a partner in here too. And while this isn't necessarily a workflow gripe or workflow types of stories, I think it impacts our workflow because so often it's the clients that cause us to struggle with the work that we do because they just are completely unreasonable with their expectations. And this one might take the cake. Mark Edmondson said, I once had an audit client who didn't trust the Excel sum function, so would print off the Excel sheet and manually add the numbers to check it was correct. He was very proud of this control that he had implemented. Doesn't trust the Excel sum function, so he prints the sheet and then manually foots all the numbers just to make sure that Excel didn't make a mistake. Eileen Gilpin said, I had a client who had an in-home daycare and insisted that the receipts stated juice boxes, not wine box, and wanted them coded to COGS, supplies, and materials. Yeah, not exactly a workflow problem, but I suppose it could create a workflow problem when your client is asking you to help them commit tax fraud. Becky said, reimbursement request paid to an employee with hundreds of transactions paid by personal credit cards needing expense coding. It's like reverse commingling to get points on their personal credit card. I actually had a client that did this as well. And at the time, I guess, I was just happy to do the work. But then as I got more experience, I started to think, what is the cost of the labor to do all of this expense reporting and accounting? Is it really more that we are gaining from the credit card points versus what we are spending on labor to do all of the accounting? I don't know if anyone ever thought about that. Barbara Choi said, slide decks perfectioning for the management/live presentations up to version 25. That was also a pain point of mine as a manager. I remember spending hours and hours every month getting those slide decks, financials just right, tiny little changes up until 3 in the morning sometimes. Kirsty Gray said, I would have to say the process of poor communication all year and expectations to close the year before January 15th. Yeah, clients always wanting the books closed immediately, even though you don't have what you need to do the books and they didn't get it to you all year long. I mean, this is the problem in audit. This is the problem in client accounting services, in tax. I don't think that will necessarily ever go away, but maybe it will. I mean, we've got these AI agents now. Are they going to go out and get all that stuff for us? At least they can bug the clients so we don't have to. Victor de la Cruz said, clients sending support via email, 47 attachments, no labels, no order. Quote, let me know if you need anything else. I also hear these stories, clients texting photos, just images of documents instead of the PDFs. That's also something I think AI is going to help us with, sorting through those attachments, labeling them, renaming them. This could be a solution. Mel Sam said, and this is not a client expectation. This is a partner problem. This is an old school partner. Mel tells a story about how she was called into the managing partner's office and he was poring over a stack of paper, receipts, and other stuff while rapidly typing into his 10 key. Turns out he was doing his monthly regiment of auditing the expense reimbursement reports for all the staff. He noted that I had tipped 12% at a client lunch that I paid for a month ago. I still didn't really get it, and he proceeded to tell me that the firm policies only tip 10%, and anything above that would not be reimbursed. The overage amounted to a whopping $2.13. And this is what I like to call missing the forest for the trees, something that we kind of do in accounting a lot. How much time is it taking that partner to audit these expense reports? And is saving $2 really worth it? No. I feel that way about timesheets too, but that's a topic for another video. Thanks to everyone who commented and shared, and thanks to Puzzle for sponsoring this video. Broken workflows, they don't have to be anyone's reality anymore. There is technology that can fix them. One of those apps is Puzzle. Their AI-powered ledger handles the manual work so you can focus on what really matters. Scan the QR code on the screen to learn more, or click the link in this video's description. And if you have a question about Puzzle, go ahead and put it in the comments. Thanks everyone who watched, and see you around soon.